Hello and welcome to the Back to the Mat webinar, August 2020. We're now in a position to provide an outline timeframe of when we anticipate the England programme to fully resume. The primary source for consideration of getting back to the mat as a national programme is that we follow all guidance from the government in conjunction with the guidelines established by British Judo for clubs. The following slides show the principles of how and when delivery can and will be implemented. Please note that this timeline of activity is also outlined to link to the phased return to club judo. This presentation also includes suggested training volumes to ensure a safe return to the mat for your players. So building the fight and the fighter. This slide shows what we will aim to provide as a programme and what we would expect clubs to be able to provide or at least support along the way. I'll leave it there for you to have a look at. The paragraph at the bottom is something from British Judo, the high performance team, that outline how important randori is to their training, and it's the fundamental training element of performance judo. And this has helped us decide on our programs in ETDCs and ETDs and REDS training. So rules of engagement, these are all the policies or rules that we'll have to put in place in order to do any kind of large group trainings at ETDs and REDS. I'll leave that there for you to read. Just going to bring your attention to that last paragraph, that even though we might have a national session, if a region that you live in is in a lockdown, a local lockdown because of a spike, then obviously it's your responsibility to take that into account and not attend those sessions. These are the milestones we'd have to achieve at each stage along the way in order to get ourselves right back up to international competition and camps. Okay, hopefully they're self-explanatory enough. We're going to move on to the next slide.
This timeline shows the activity of the clubs, the England Judo programme since lockdown. In red, you can see the England coaches set 17 weekly challenges started in April. These overlapped with the virtual training sessions and suggested home training programme, which ran from June till August. Both had good engagement, mainly from Red Squad. As we enter the back to the mat phase, we expect a better engagement from ETD squad members, especially from those looking for selection for the early international competitions. These dates are a best case scenario, subject to government and the BJA safe return guidelines.
Thank you, Simon. So here we have a brief overview of the types of activities we would have expected athletes and fighters to be participating in during each stage of lockdown and through the easing of lockdown. So the first phase, off the mat, that's the phase we're still in now. Even though some clubs are actually inside, we are not making contact yet. We're counting that off the mat still. So maintaining fitness levels is obviously a priority number one. Shadow skills, mobility exercises, niwaza and tachiwaza, keeping those movements going. Club section there, that's when we are back to contact training. That means the fitness can start becoming more judo specific. The training can be increasing in its intensity and volume, and we're building towards full randori. The England section there is when we're talking about when we get back onto large sessions indoors on the mat. So we'll be focusing slightly more of our time on technical and drills than we might have in the past, and conditioning and profiling will take place. There will be randori, but that will be gradually increased, as we'll explain further later. And we'll start off with single full days training. The competition section at the end there is when we're back to full training, full camps, and everyone's training levels are back to or possibly higher than before lockdown. So where are we now? Until we can deliver a full contact national session, we want to support our fighters in keeping active. As club coaches, you are the key to this, and many of you are already organising group activities. The following slides will be put together to stimulate conversation on how we best support the players. Our key message that we need to return safely. This means adhering to the COVID-19 requirements, but also being mindful of a fighter's capabilities, taking into consideration injury prevention, cognitive physical mismatch. This is also a good time to reevaluate goals, start on strengths and weaknesses, work on strengths and weaknesses. We need to avoid the concept of catch-up, which means rushing straight back into full randori 3 times a week, which could cause injury. We need to take into consideration a considered approach, planning training to mitigate against injury. While working remotely, our team has been looking at ways to increase training volumes for our England Pathway players, where the club and national programme provide a service that allows players to compete and perform on an international level. As a judo nation, our training hours are significantly lower than our international opponents. And this is something that between us, we must rectify to ensure players have a fighting chance in Europe and beyond, and transition to a senior fighter. Our aim as a programme over the next 12 months is to ensure that the average training hours of all England Pathway fighters are increased. Part of our offer is to resume weekly ETDC sessions from January and review contact hours across the programme. During this COVID-19 period, we can start to make headway in cementing supplementary training that remains as part of a player's weekly training programme. It's important to note that we are not trying to take any of the coaching away from the clubs, but offer resources to support them and the athletes in increasing their training volumes where we can.
So this slide just puts into that what's been said there, just into sort of a condensed form. So where are we now and where do we want to be? And we've entitled this Bridging the Gap. So our aim is to increase training volumes throughout the pathway in order to improve our fighters' physicality, allowing them to better apply their technical judo on the international stage, supporting their transition to a senior fighter. We need to make sure that our fighters are as best prepared as possible to compete on the international scene. So it's not just about domestic competition or winning in this country, but winning internationally as well. And one way we can do this is by increasing the volume or increasing that training age of our young fighters. Whilst we're doing this, we know that individual differences must be taken into account. So biological age must be considered, i.e. how mature a young fighter is mentally and physically. And all throughout, it's important to maintain the training principles of progression and overload, as well as rest and recovery. The key messages that we want to get across to our fighters in the pathway through coaches and through parents, and also through education of the athletes themselves, or the fighters themselves. It's important that when we get the opportunity to be back on the mat and training as a national programme, that they are fit to do that training, as in they are robust enough to complete the type of training we expect of them as a national programme. So being able to get on the mat and step on and do the volume that's required is very important. At the same time, we appreciate we will have to build it up gradually, but we do expect them to be training and keeping up some physicality in this period. Once we're back on the mat and into what we would say the usual, more like the normal programme, it's imperative that our fighters are conditioned to be competitive against the best in Europe. So stronger, faster, technically and tactically dominant. We want them to be competitive, and we want them to be able to have the best possible chance of being successful as well. So the pictures just emphasise what we're looking at in terms of physical training, the lifestyle balance with things like school, exams at certain times, work. We understand that that's important as well. But we want them to emphasise good nutrition, so fueling their performances, fueling the training and recovery, and sleep and rest in between that is really important as well. This is all to help facilitate their adaptation and growth and repair. So initially, really want to emphasise that good foundations in movement skills are very important, and then they can learn and change and adapt and build on those foundations.
Thank you. So here is sort of where we started from in terms of how to decide on training volumes. And this is what we thought a typical pre-cadet might be doing on a weekly basis before COVID-19 happened. And we started with pre-cadet as that's our baseline where the England program really starts. So with a couple of PE sessions a week and some extracurricular sports, which pre-cadets would still be participating in. 2 club sessions, again, that's an average. We know some pre-cadets would be doing more. Some pre-cadets wouldn't be able to access that much at the moment. This equates to 7 hours of activity a week, and that is all being provided for them. That's a key thing here, because that's something we are addressing later. The ETDC session, I've put that in yellow because we know some pre-cadets were able to access ETDC sessions and some weren't. So we haven't included that. We also haven't included anything that happens on a weekend, because that should all happen in addition to what goes on a regular basis. I know some people, again, this is a total average. Some pre-cadets might have been doing a lot more than this already, and some may be doing less. So, but this is just a starting point of how we calculated what we'd like them to do over the next period. And that leads us to this. So, as I just mentioned, even though they were doing 7 hours before, we've put 6 hours plus by the pre-cadets, because the difference being that everything in that previous slide was being provided for them. And as a pre-cadet especially, it's a lot to expect someone of that age to take on their own training and match those hours. So we've given them a realistic, total of 6 hours plus, and split that down into a few different sessions. As you can see, as we go up to cadet and juniors, they should be a lot more focused on their training already, and those hours reflect that. Again, I expect perceptions of this to differ. Some people will see this as a lot, some people might see it as not much at all. So this is what we've thought is realistic to aim for some people of this age.
We've put together just some information really around what those types of sessions and types of training look like. Judo involves and incorporates all the different types of training and fitness, and these are some of the ideas when we're using these phrases, what each session might involve. A judo session would obviously incorporate most, if not all, of these. The RPE scale is their rate of perceived exertion scale. It's there to help athletes, coaches, parents monitor the intensity of sessions and help them get the variety. So it's not always working at 100% all the time. It's about that recovery and the right types of sessions at the right times as well. So we're still looking at building a variety of sessions, getting the best experience, really building the overall fighter.
So again, I've aimed this at pre-cadets because that's our baseline, and I'll quickly explain how it expands up into cadets. But these slightly more detail on the boxes you just saw in the previous slide of activities that could contribute towards those hours in the week. So for a pre-cadet, as we said, it's hard for them potentially to try and provide training for themselves. So anything that sort of includes strenuous exercise, so it could be a cycle out with just their family, you know, going out for a cycle with their parents or something like that, that could count towards the training hours, or going and playing other sports, either with friends or family, or if any of their other sports clubs are open now, that could be included in their training hours as well. As the athletes get older and progress into cadets and juniors, we would have expected their training to become more focused, and some of these exercises that are listed wouldn't necessarily be applicable for those. So that leads us on to this. It's a total example of a weekly program that a pre-cadet might be able to follow at the moment. As I said, it's only an example. Some people might want to do all of their sessions in the evenings. Some people might prefer to do mornings. This is just a guide, really. It absolutely could be changed to each individual. It does include the recommendations we put forward before, with the 3 strength sessions, 3 aerobic or anaerobic sessions, and then 2 core stability, strength and flexibility sessions. The club sessions, which you can see are on here on a Tuesday evening and a Saturday morning, include more than one aspect of training, as club sessions normally do. I've kept it simple for the pre-cadets. It's easy, just one chunk of exercise a day for 1 hour. This should really be the absolute minimum. Even government guidelines on staying healthy for a child of this age say 1 hour a day, which is obviously 7 hours. So the fact that we've put here 6 hours training, this should be an absolute minimum for the people, fighters of this age. The more they can do, the better. As they go back to school, as you can see, I've not included any school activities here like PE. As they do go back to school and they start picking up PE lessons and extracurricular sports, they could substitute some of those in and try and apply them correctly. So if they've done a sport that is mostly cardiovascular based, then they could substitute that in for one of their cardiovascular sessions, and so on. Put 2 club sessions here. I know not all clubs are back at all at the moment. Some are doing outdoor stuff. If the club isn't back, then obviously that's more emphasis on the fighter having to do more sessions themselves. And if your club is only back once a week, then obviously the same again. This is just, as I said, an example of what might be happening.
And following on from that, this is an example of a weekly program for a cadet. You can see the volume is increased here. We expect that the fighters are more focused on their judo at this point, but at the same time they still might be doing other sports, so there's still plenty of room for flexibility on this. We're expecting, you know, at least 10 hours here, although we do say that intensity could also be substituted for time. Some guides on the sort of intensity of those sessions are there, and obviously it's important to recover as well. You know, volume at different times will go up and down. For example, over an ETD weekend, they could well be doing sort of 10 to 12 hours of training over just a weekend. So you know, week by week the schedule would look to be different for each person.
Yeah.
I'll try not to repeat too much of what Jason and Sophie have already said. The junior weekly programme will need to fit around the commitments of the fighter, whether that's work or education, with early morning and evening training sessions. Some juniors, through tasks, their club coach, university programme, or working with their own S&C coach, will have an individualised training plan. That should have a similar volume of training, but maybe structured in a different way to the sample programme. This is the minimum expected of a junior ETD fighter.
Okay, so here is a representation of what the first 3 red sessions will look like when we go back after lockdown. Okay, so we're going to build it up gradually. As you can see, the technical and drills section of the first session on Red's day 1 is an hour and a half, and then the randori is only 30 minutes. So that will be done in 2 groups. So each individual will only be doing 15 minutes of randori there. The niwaza randori would be in 1 group, so they would be doing a whole 30 minutes of randori there, but the other times the technique and drills are the same. Going on to day 2, the technique and drills is an hour and 15, allowing for 45 minutes randori. Again, 2 groups for the tachiwaza and 1 group for the niwaza. And then finally, by the 3rd session, this is back to what we were experiencing before, which was 1 hour of technique and drills and 1 hour of randori. Again, 2 groups for tachiwaza, 1 group for niwaza. The conditioning part is starting off focusing on core stability and mobility, building strength in the 2nd one, and then going on to strength building and speed on the 3rd one. Again, progressing there. Now, this is probably only achievable if everyone's maintained their fitness levels. It will be judged by the coach on the day. If it needs to be changed, it will be.
ETD squad days will be split male and female. As with the Reds days, they will start with tachiwaza and then newaza after lunch, finishing with some conditioning. This is to mitigate the chance of injury during tachiwaza through fatigue. Each day will have 5 hours mat time. Day 1 will have 24 minutes of tachiwaza randori, split into 2 groups for 100% recovery. Added to 60 minutes newaza, totaling 84 minutes of randori on day 1, 107 minutes on day 2, and 130 minutes of randori on day 3. We expect various levels of fitness, so it will be down to the coach's discretion to pull fighters out if needed.
Okay, so looking to the future, taking that pre-cadet example earlier of what we thought they might have been doing before lockdown, and we've added some extra bits. So looking at a couple of CV or strength circuits added in a couple of mornings a week. Now, this is building on the fact that they, during this period, hopefully getting into a bit of a habit of providing some of their own training. And if they can continue that going forward, that means that they'll be putting themselves in a really good position to help themselves increase their training volumes. Again, as mentioned earlier, it's important that as the athletes specialize, moving up into cadets and probably start dropping some of these extracurricular sports out, they don't just lose that hour of activity. That should be substituted for something else that's more focused towards judo. And then we're just going to repeat this slide here, just to emphasize again what we will hopefully do as a program, provide for each fighter, and what we'd hope the clubs could do to support them in that as well. And here is something that we thought we'd get a lot of questions about, and that's how would we form the squads for next year. If on the off chance we cannot have a British Championships or any other selection event, then all the Reds would get a rollover from minors up to Cadet 1. And then there could be some that we think from their training behaviours and performances that deserve a trial up to ETD level, and we'll have to do that selection. You know, Cadet 1s and 2s will get a rollover in ETD. Cadet 3s who will be moving up to junior will get a selection based on previous performance and training behaviours, so that'll be a selection from the coaches. All juniors and under 23s will get a rollover. There will be a nomination process, so anyone who doesn't get that initial rollover or a selection can put forward an application process. to nominate themselves for a place, which will be assessed by the whole team. We expect a slightly higher number in ETD than normal, but that's not a problem in our eyes. We think that's something that is necessary going forward. Thank you for listening, and we haven't had any questions pop up. If anyone has any, you can email a member of the team.